why the big deal over this rabbi? So the name of the rabbi is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. It's Rabbi Shimon, Simon, Bar Yochai, the son of Yochai. We don't even know his last name. Truth is, they didn't have last names back then, but his name is Simon, right? Shimon. Ben Yochai, the son of Yochai. And for some reason, Jews are more crazy about this rabbi than any rabbi on earth, period, times a million. Times a million. You won't see anyone go this crazy for Moses. No one's going to go crazy for Moses like this, even though we don't know where Moses is buried, but you know, you could do something in honor of his yahrzeit. We know his yahrzeit. Nope. You'll be lucky that someone lights a candle for Moses. You know, for Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, everyone goes insane. Give you an example. Raise your hand if you never, before this trip, you never even heard of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Raise your hand, you never heard of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Come on, you heard of Rabbi Shimon Pixie from Byron Bay? Really? I'm so impressed. So, okay, you two raise your hand, you never heard of Rabbi Shimon? No. So hold your hands up for a sec, Simon. Okay, you never heard of Rabbi Shimon? Raise your hand if you never heard of Rabbi Shimon. Now, keep your hands up if you never heard of Hillel. Rabbi Hillel. You ever heard of Hillel? Never heard of Hillel? Never heard of Hillel? Hillel is about 1 million times more known, perhaps, to people who don't know a lot of Judaism than Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon has everyone going crazy over him. And you're going to hear his name so many times in these different songs. They have these like rapturous kind of meditative chants that they're going to be doing the whole time with the bands. The band plays these chants till it's like literally coming out your ears. And for days on end, you'll still be singing. Bar Yochai. They don't go with this first name, just Bar Yochai, the son of Yochai. Bar Yochai nimshachto hashecha. That's one of them. And the other real famous one is, the other couple of famous ones is, V'amatem kol echai, Adonenu bar Yochai, V'amatem kol echai, Rabbi Shimon Tzadikai. Over and over and over again. And you're like, stop already. So they finally stop. And then they do just incredible klezmer tunes. Incredible dancing songs that bring the spirit up so high. And then after a few more minutes of that, like a half hour if you're lucky, right back into Bar Yochai. So for days on end, your brain is just Bar Yochai. Bar Yochai. And anyway, so it's exciting. A lot of fun. It's a total brainwash on Bar Yochai, which is weird, but you know, like, why do we all have to be so crazy about this rabbi? So I'd like to describe, in part, what it is that draws us to him. And some of you who've never heard of him or never been drawn to him, you'll realize once you go that you are being drawn to him. I mean, this is uncanny and just bizarre how we get drawn to him. To the point where I met a French kid up there, a totally secular kid from Paris. I met this kid, he was about 17 years old. I met him, I said, what are you doing here? He says, oh, my brother went to yeshiva 5 years ago, and I visited him in Israel. And it was right at this time of year, and he took me here. And he says, ever since I went once, I can't stop going. So I fly here every year. My brother's not even in yeshiva. My brother's back in Paris. But he flies, I fly, we come every year. You can't miss it. You know what? You know you cannot get a plane flight in here to try to get in here for Wednesday, because everyone is flying in Wednesday. Men, women, children who can, are flying in Wednesday, partying all Wednesday night, all day Thursday, and then flying out Thursday night, back for Shabbos in America. They're coming just for the night. People who can stay for Shabbos are staying, but many of those people will be here just for the night. And it also, another strange thing is, it's an international holiday, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai Day. No matter where you go, people will celebrate it. If you go to New York, they'll be celebrating it. LA, they'll be celebrating it. Wherever you go, they celebrate it. It's an incredible day. But it really only exists on the mountain. Meaning you could go to the biggest party on the planet that's besides this party, and if you left this party and went to that party, you'd be like, this is not it. This is like some kind of a try to be like it. But it's not even like it. It's the only it. There is no other it. And so it's very hard to leave the mountain because it doesn't matter if you're going to some wedding or something or that they put specifically on Lag BaOmer, it will not be the same. And for that reason, Hasidim never get married on this day because that's the big marriage. That's the big marriage of the day. One more thing, it's called the Hilula, which means the wedding, de Bar Yochai. Hilula de Bar Yochai. It is the wedding of Bar Yochai. Why are we calling it his wedding if it's really his yahrzeit? It's the day he died. Why are we calling the day he died the wedding? Any takers?
Didn't he say to celebrate his life?
Celebrate his life? Yeah, but why call it a wedding? Yeah, Aaron?
With God.
What?
Being reunited with God.
Excellent, yeah. So when there's a, I don't know how to say it, but death, a lot of us in life look at death as bad, but in spiritual life, in mystical life, the way we look at things is you're now separated from God, and when you pass away, you get back together. So it's like a wedding. The death day is like a wedding. But his day is considered the wedding, like the wedding of Bar Yochai, the marriage of Bar Yochai, where he kind of remarried God. Why that? Why him more than anyone else? Maybe because his soul was so lofty that it getting back together with God is like a wedding we all got to celebrate. Like that soul getting back together with God, reuniting with God, is something we've got to celebrate extra. I guess, I don't know exactly, but I have a feeling that's the idea. That the holier you are, the more close you are with God, but if you're locked down here in the matrix. So when you die, that's really the wedding where you're finally getting back together with God. It's kind of like a re-wedding, like a remarriage, marrying the same bride, because you're remarrying God, because we were all married to God. Then we're down here, it's like you've been divorced, and then you remarry God when you pass away. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai lived during the time of the Roman persecution after the destruction of the temple. The Romans had taken over Israel, and with our labor, they had built up Israel in a major way. Roadways, bathhouses, every kind of amenity that was modern to Rome that Israel did not have, suddenly Israel had. And of course, they destroyed the temple. They ran off with most of the Jews, dragged them into slavery, killed countless amounts of people, a full-on Holocaust situation. But when the dust settled, they just had their Jewish, slaves and stuff. And they were particularly after rabbis, because, as you guys know, at least until the state of Israel, who led the Jewish nation? Who led the Jewish nation until the state of Israel for thousands of years? Rabbis. Rabbis lead the state. So because rabbis lead the state of Israel, that's who they went after. They went after the leaders. And they really went after the rabbis. So the rabbis tried to lay low as best they could. And what happened was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was with some Jews, and they were talking. And one of the Jews said, "Hey, how do you like these bathhouses? How do you like these roadways? I mean, the Romans aren't that bad. It's, just had a nice bath, didn't we?" And Rabbi Shimon's looks at him and says, "I don't want their stinking bathhouses. I don't want their stinking roadways, and I don't want their stinking infrastructure. As far as I'm concerned, I'd rather jump in a muddy mikveh than be in some fancy Roman bathhouse, with them ruling over our country and having destroyed our temple," right? I know Jews who feel that way today about the modern state of Israel. Take your roadways. I don't mind going back 50 years if we can go back to living as Jews in the land. All this modernity is not worth it at the expense of spirituality. Jews are known for spirituality, not for good highways. Anyway, but that was the kind of answer Rabbi Shimon gave. And it turned out that the guy who asked him was actually a double agent. And he was out to kill Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He wasn't going to kill him with his own hands. He was going to report him as an insurgent, as someone who's, has it in for the Romans. You're supposed to keep your mouth shut about the Romans. So he went to the leading Romans at the time. I guess he brought his MP3 player and did a little playback of the conversation. And they said, we're going to kill him. And news got back to Rabbi Shimon that he had, how do they call it, a price on his head? Does that sound right? Is that what they say? Yeah, there's a price on his head, and the Romans are coming to get him. So Rabbi Shimon said, wow, I better run home and hide. And then someone made a very chauvinist comment and said, wives talk. Dangerous move. How do you like that one, ladies? Wives talk. Not that any wife wants to have their husband caught by the Romans, but they do talk. So it does say that that speech, when God gave speech to the planet, he gave, it was in 10 parts. He gave 9 to women and 1 part to men. So they do talk. Anyway, so they love talking, which is great if you're a man and bored. So always remember, men, the first thing you do when you get home is use the bathroom. The first thing when you get home is you hear your wife's day. Do the lady a favor and let her just purge her day. And you just sit there and nod, okay? Don't look at your cell phone the whole time, okay? And once in a while, reiterate what they said in new words. Okay? Just reiterate what they said. And if you have some kind of solution to a problem that might have shown up that day, like something went wrong, like she had to take 3 buses for like 2 hours, when really all she had to do was get on bus 8, don't say that. Don't say that. No. The next time she goes to that town, say to her, oh, guess what? I did a little research for you. On bus 8, we'll get you back in a half hour. She'll be like, thank you so much. You just saved me my whole afternoon. But if you tell her about bus 8, when she's still venting from her day, you'll get something like, you can't even listen. Never fix a woman. They're self-fixing. Women are self-healing. They just need to talk about it. Let them talk, they're all good. Don't let them talk, you're in trouble, okay? So, how am I doing so far, ladies? Have I nailed it more or less? Oh, we have 1 married woman here, 2 married women. 2 married women. That works? Yeah?
Just like wishing my husband was here right now.
Well, the problem is you're going for like full cell phone out of the situation. Just tell them 10 minutes. Just go for 10 minutes. Just tell them you can just turn that off the first 10 minutes. I'll be done in 10 minutes. You can go right back to life. You can come back to life in 10 minutes.
2 decades, he's like onto it,
Okay. And since we're discussing advice to women, what's the advice? I have a student here who just graduated my special seminar. So, what do you do when your husband comes home?
You let him come home, you give him dinner, and then you let him have it.
Right. Man's got to feel safe in his own home. Man's got to feel safe in his own home. So let him at least get through the doorway and get something in his stomach before he gets it. Okay, then afterwards you can let him have it. But don't let him have it at the doorway, because he'll just come home later each day.
I better watch it now. You could have saved my parents' marriage.
You could have saved my parents' marriage. She used to give it to him at the doorway? Yeah? Yeah, not a good idea.
30, 40 years later, my father's saying, son, you want to know why all those men are still at the Jewish Community Center at 10:30 at night?
Is that the end of it? Did he answer? Or that was it? It was enough said.
That's why I'm my age and not married.
Oh, gosh. Oh, gosh. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Me? It was just a really quick story. Like my friend's father, who's this Holocaust survivor, 80-year-old man. He just decided to retire. He's an accountant in Boston, okay? and he dutifully like worked every year for like his $40,000 whatever, and he's about to retire, and his supervisor said, you know, Mr. Friedman, you have like over a year vacation. Accumulated, just like take a paid vacation. He had never taken a day off. His wife begged him, oh, Michael, why don't you just take a day off? I don't have no days coming to me. He had over a year. He just couldn't take one
Year
day
of
off.
vacation.
He just was like crazy and like, you know, he went to
That's
work.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Over a year.
I just got called in. I got called in this week by the Aish accountant saying, like, you have not taken a vacation day since you worked here. And that's the same story that happened to me.
Oh.
Only I have this cushy job. You know? It's a very different job. I'm not sitting there crunching numbers all day, you know. You know, we have Pesach off, you know, Sukkah's off, every Jewish holiday's off, every Friday's off, every Shabbos is off, you know. But I never took a vacation day, not one. So I'm just accumulating vacation days all the time, which is apparently not very good in his eyes. Good for me, but not necessarily good for Aish. So anyway, so now I'm not taking vacation days. I'm going to write that I took them, though I will be right here with you guys. I have to at least affirm that I took them. Yeah. So. Truth is, I've never worked a day in my life. I really haven't. My father tried to put me to work when I was a kid, and I fell asleep in every single position he gave me in his company. The last job that I actually finally could stay awake at was the forklift driver. I was the forklift driver in the warehouse. And that I could stay awake at. I created an entire race course all the way around the whole warehouse. And I got this thing running so fast, this forklift. So I could stay awake because I needed that kind of stimulation of forklift racing. And anyway, but I lost that job too because I started taking out pillars that were holding up like several more stories of other offices and stuff. And they were getting complaints of like tremors and stuff. And yeah, seismic tremors. And anyway, they called my dad and they're like, your son's taking out the pillars holding up the building with the forklift. And they can't say anything to me because I'm the boss's kid, you know. And next thing I know, I lost that job. That was the last job I had. I think I was like 12 years old. It was my last job. Okay. I remember once I got in so much trouble that my father took away my surfboard.
Oh.
But he doesn't realize I have like 5 or 6 surfboards. But he did get my newest and best board, and the board I really used every single day. And so, you keep your boards in a board bag. So I just went into his office. He kept it behind his desk in his office, in this big office, you know, executive office with a surfboard. So I went and just one day when my dad was on a business trip, I just went, took my board out of the bag, put one of my oldest broken up boards inside the bag. And then I had my board back, which was great. And I can't surf without my main board. So anyway, my dad, after a few months, was like, don't you need your board back? I'm like, no, you keep it. Hold on to it. Yeah, so back to Rabbi Shimon. So he decided to hide in a cave. He went off to a cave with the clothes on his back, and he took his son, Elazar, who was one of the great sages as well. Now, this is in the days where you knew all the oral Torah by heart. They know all Torah. There's no written book. There's no Mishnah. Okay, there's no Gemara. They know it all. Everyone knew it all. So they're just going with like all of Torah in their heads, hiding in a cave. Now, they had an issue. And that issue, well, there's a couple issues. One is food, one is water, and the third is clothing. They only had their outfits. So listen what they did. Because you're supposed to wear your finest clothes on Shabbat, you guys know about that? You know, we dress up a bit for Shabbat. Whatever you got, but if you only have T-shirts and a button-down, you save the button-down for Shabbat. You're supposed to save your nicest for Shabbat. So, but they only had one set of clothes. And they were going to wear them out and stuff, and they wanted clothes for Shabbat. So you ready for what they did for when they studied? All they do is study all day anyway. So now they're studying in this cave. So what they did was they took off their clothes, and they buried themselves in sand inside the cave, because you can't study Torah naked. So they buried themselves like up to here in sand. and spent their entire, it's just two talking heads. Can you imagine you like walked in that cave? You walk in that cave and you're just like, ah! It's just, all you see is like beards on the sand. And these two rabbis just going like, I say he's innocent. I say he's guilty. And they are, they're discussing case law, And anyway, but that's what they did for 12 years.
All from their head.
What?
All from their head.
Yeah, all the sages knew the oral law by heart. The Mishnah was only written soon after, like that period, actually. The Mishnah was written then because of the Roman persecution. It got so bad that they couldn't remember the Torah. So they just got everything together, everyone who knew it, and wrote down everything in the Mishnah. And so now we read it because of thank God they wrote it down. But otherwise we'd be really, really lost right now as Jews. So that Mishnah is our saving grace for our tradition of what we do. How do you wear a pair of tefillin? How do you build a mikveh? How do you keep Shabbat? It's all in the Mishnah. Everything we do is in the Mishnah. Now, anyway, but came Friday, they would come up out of the sand, clean themselves off, and get in their clothes and spend Shabbat in the cave in their clothes. For food, they had a carob tree grow right in the mouth of the cave, blocking the cave, which is kind of a familiar thing in Israel. You see a lot of fig trees and carob trees right at the mouths of caves, and you don't know there's a cave there. You can hike by it 1,000,000 times and never know it, and one day you're just like, isn't that a cave? And you look right behind the tree trunk, and you can go in these deep caves hidden by these trees. My closest mountain bike ride here is blocked by a fig tree, a big cave blocked by a fig tree. No one knows about it. So anyway, they lived in this cave, and that was their food was carob. They ate carobs all the time. That sounds really delicious. And for drink, they had a spring. And obviously the tradition is that the spring sprung up at the spot, which very well may be the case. What?
Is there still a spring there?
Yeah, the Peking is a place, I think. Has anyone ever been there? Was there a spring?
Yeah, they really popularized the spring, and they have pictures from the 1800s of when all the Druze and the Christians and the Jews were hanging out, the women dangling their feet in the spring.
Really?
A lot of pride in the spring, which is only about 2 inches deep.
But it was enough for Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Glaser. Yeah, it was cold?
Yeah.
Anyway, so they had a spring, it's still there, and this carob tree. And that's how they lived. They drank from the spring, and they lived in the sand. Before I forget, just to mention that when they, I'll just go in order, I won't forget. Throughout those years, they had a visitor at the cave. The visitor was Elijah the prophet. Elijah the prophet never died. If you read the Tanakh, you see that Elijah actually is one of these few characters who actually never died. There's no burial. We don't have a tomb for him. Nothing. Elijah, we have tombs all over the country for the greatest prophets and everyone, except for Elijah, because Elijah never died, and that's why he shows up every Passover at every Pesach table, and he shows up at every Brit Milah, at every circumcision. We have a seat for Elijah at every circumcision. We have a cup of wine for him every Passover, because he never died, and he just kind of hangs around. But he also learns with great scholars, teaches them, and he came to the cave and taught. Elijah came to the cave and taught Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Glaser. They would have direct classes from Elijah the prophet, which is cool because Elijah had passed away many, many years before this, and they got to learn with him. But even if you hang around Israel long enough, you'll meet people with Elijah stories. Have any of you had an Elijah story? Elijah stories? You meet people with Elijah stories. There's some great Elijah stories.
You ever had one?
I never got to have one of my own, but I have a friend who had one. Her husband was out of the house. She had to give birth, and she thought she had more time, but she didn't. She went into hard labor, and she had to get to the hospital immediately. They lived up this alley, up by Shmuel Navi back there on I forget what the name called that street, but they were over there up this alley, and it's hard. You can't get a cab there. And so they had to wobble their way down to this main street, Shmuel Navi. But what happened was as soon as they came out of she got the neighbor to walk down the stairs with her. As soon as they got to the top of the alley, there was a cab driver with his door open saying, "Right this way, ladies." And they get in the back of the cab. And he jams out of there, and he tells them there's going to be green lights all the way to Shaare Zedek. Now, if you know where Shmuel Navi is, you know where Shaare Zedek is. It's a lot of intersections and a lot of difficulty to make that trip. And lo and behold, every single light turned green. Like even if it would just turn red, it would then turn green. He didn't even touch the brakes the whole way. And while they're talking to him, they're trying to get his info because they want to invite him. If there's a boy, they want to invite him to the Brit. And so they got his name. His name was strange. His name, it said, Na'im Zmirot Yisrael, the beautiful songs of Israel. What kind of name is that? The beautiful songs of Israel. That was his name. And they took down his code, meaning every driver has an ID. And the company, the cab number company, the cab company. Anyway, it was an emergency berth, and this emergency berth was a little surgery they set up with white, like curtains, in the lobby of Shaare Zedek. It was in the lobby of the hospital that she gave birth. And it really would have been that bad. And it wasn't going to be a cab birth, meaning that she might not have made it if she hadn't had the surgery there. Yeah, it was a major thing. And she's a super, super, super holy lady, the holiest lady. She has 11 boys, 2 girls. And I'm friends with the baby born that day is a really close buddy of mine. And all of them are buddies of mine. And they called the next day, the cab company, they answered the phone, and they said, "Hi, we're looking for cab number such and such, Na'im Zmirot Yisrael, the beautiful songs of Israel." And they're like, "What? We don't have that cab number, and we don't have that name on our roster of drivers." And that was it. So she believes she got to have an Eliyahu Hanavi experience. I've heard amazing stories where he literally went poof. Like the 6-day war scene was amazing. That a couple 6-day war Elijahs with soldiers in the fire line. And anyway, happy is the one who got to meet Eliyahu Hanavi. On the other hand, he probably would only come in emergencies for any one of us. The only other people who gets to meet him are top sages who get to study with him. And that's what they got. After 12 years in the cave, Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah comes back to the cave, and he says, "The Romans have absolved you," meaning that whoever was out to kill you, it's gone. You can come out now. And they're like, "We can come out? Great." So they leave the cave because they want to see their families and wives, kids, everything. They haven't seen their families in 12 years. So they get themselves ready to go, and they walk out of the cave, and they're walking, through the mountains and stuff on their way home. There were no cars in those days. And they come upon a field. And in this field is a farmer, a Jewish farmer, farming his land. And Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Eliezer look at this farmer and say, "How can you be farming this land when you could be learning the Torah? Like, are you out of your mind? You're working when you could be learning Torah? Crazy." And so the farmer looks up at them, hearing this. They're really just talking to each other, like, how can this be? The farmer looks up at them and self-immolates, like spontaneously combusts in flames and dies. They killed the farmer. Strange. But they're they just had this fire look in their eyes and killed this poor guy, because they don't forget where they're coming from. They're coming from 24/7, 12 years of pure Torah. And they come out, some guy's farming his field. Why would you work when you could be in the Torah? A voice comes from heaven. "This is what you do with my Torah. You're burning farmers. You're farmer burners. You're burning farmers. With my Torah, you're going to burn the farmers. get back in that cave. And they were sent back up to the cave for another year. And they had to spend a 13th year buried in sand for this. And the point of that year was to continue learning, but to not come out of there burning people up with their Torah. This is an apropos lesson, I think, for anyone who spends some time in Israel and then goes back to where they're from, all on fire, and they're like, oh, Pixie's back. Pixie comes back, to Byron Bay and Australia, and he's just like, he's like a fire-breathing dragon, But you can come back pretty intense, Daniel. Come back to a bunch of people who have not changed at all. And you've like totally grown and totally gotten into Torah and totally like doing Shabbat. Like you get it. And you're just like burning people everywhere you go. You get that, David? So it's a lesson for all of us is to learn how to temper your approach. Anyway, they had real quick, they had a 13th year in there, 13th year in the cave. They came out, everything was chill, they didn't burn nobody, and went back to their lives. And then what happened was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was given the great task of scribing all of the Kabbalah from Mount Sinai. Remember, because of the Romans, they were writing the Mishnah, so they had to write the Zohar. So he scribed the Zohar. And that's, now of course he didn't write it, it's all the conversations of Kabbalah. It's the same conversations as the Mishnah, only it's about the secrets of creation. We'll get into the secrets of creation. Tomorrow we'll talk about what the Kabbalah is all about that he scribed in that book called the Zohar. Okay, it's called the Zohar, which means, what does it mean to radiate? Or Zohar is it's a light, but it's like a radiant light. Luminance. Illumination. Shalom, everybody.